Have you taken a look around lately? While we slept, we apparently endured a silent invasion. An invasion of unicorns. They are everywhere. On clothes, books, toys, bedding, jewelry, games, even lighters and duct tape. Nothing seems safe from the unicorn's influence or presence. One simple search on Amazon.com, for example, yielded over 700,000 results. On eBay, it's nearly doubled. Like a swarm of hungry mosquitoes, this modern manifestation of the mystical mythical malcontent appears to love just about everything and everyone. But why? What is it about unicorns that have so thoroughly captivated mankind throughout history? And why have they made such an overwhelming and immediate return? What exactly is the symbolic message being revealed? Unicorns have been with mankind for almost as long as the written word, with the King James Version of the Bible even translating the unknown Hebrew word re'em as unicorn. Of the more than half-dozen references to that enigmatic essence in the Old Testament, there is one that strangely seems to mimic the later meaning of its presence. Will the unicorn be willing to serve thee, or abide by thy crib? In this instance, crib is not what automatically comes to mind, that of a baby's bed. It is, in fact, a feeding trough. In other words, will the unicorn be tamed and serve you, or will you serve the unicorn? This is all the more intriguing when you consider that this passage originates in the book of Job, and the act of serving means that you have a job. The common meaning of the unicorn is that of a strong, wild, and free being. For some strange reason, they are believed to be intimately associated with the feminine, even though they outwardly possess the traditional phallic symbol of the masculine. Given this obvious ambiguity, we can conclude that the unicorn itself is androgynous, or representative of both sexes. Another common meaning associated with the unicorn is the aspect of purity, which manifests itself in the fact that only a virgin is said to be able to tame a unicorn. While some may claim that unicorns succumb to anyone with a pure heart, and not just those with their pride and virtue undisturbed, they unfortunately ignore a key symbolic reference. You see, being pure of heart implies a spiritual element, while being pure in the nether regions can only refer to the physical realm. This will be of critical importance in our analysis. Both of these elements, androgyny and purity, help reveal what the unicorn symbol truly represents. Thanks to my decade of research in the art of deciphering the symbolism around us, and the multiple books I have written discussing the subject, I believe I am uniquely qualified to present the following for your humble consideration. Before we continue, however, you need to be introduced to a very rudimentary understanding of what I have discovered in my research. Basically, I am the writer of several books that dares to put forth an astonishing new theory regarding the operation of time. Instead of a reality dominated by seemingly disparate, chaotic, and wholly unique events that, in many cases, just seem to happen without reason, or as a result of imaginary free will, I theorize that our existence is solely governed by a pre-planned operational directive. That directive, in combination with an ingenious phenomenon I call the mirror, is what has formed all of what you see around you. The mirror effectively manages everything in reality as it uncontrollably seeks to have it conform to Newton's third law of motion. For every action, event, there is an equal and opposite reaction, or re-event. In other words, every event has a mirror opposite that plays with the roles and sequence of events reversed. As above, so below. As before, so again. Everything is tightly controlled. Duality provides the tit-for-tat back-and-forth motion necessary for the system to attain a temporary balance. This seeks to reset the clock by resetting the score. And thanks to the mirror, you always recognize the action, yet always ignore or reject it as the source of the reaction. Quite simply, there is always a story playing above and a story playing below. With respect to the unicorn, we all know that story above. But now, as the late radio personality Paul Harvey used to say, it's time you learn the rest of the story. It's time we hear from that bound and gagged creature known as truth that has, for so long, silently lay entombed beneath. In the quantum world, a phenomenon known as entanglement can occur between pairs or even groups of particles. When entanglement occurs, it becomes impossible to describe the quantum state of each particle independently from its entangled brethren. They are effectively correlated. For example, if the spin of one in a pair is determined to be up, you automatically know the spin of its twin at that precise moment will be down. As with Newton's third law of motion, this is yet another way that the universe innately maintains its prime directive of balance. Of course, I purposefully left out the paradoxical fact that the simple act of observing any property of a particle automatically changes its quantum state. Like any good trap, the individual building blocks of the universe know they are being watched and deliberately change their state to perpetually frustrate and confuse their inmates. My explanation was deliberately simplistic because I merely wished to impress upon everyone that you don't have to be a physicist to understand the fundamental properties of our uncrackable cage. You simply have to view the world from the perspective of the mirror and understand the obsessive, irresistible, and unchangeable desire for balance, for justice. In order to continue, we must make the logical conclusion that everyone and everything must naturally possess a quantum-esque entangled twin. You cannot exist without the balance provided by your mysterious and unknown doppelganger. To use a nautical term, each serves as ballast for the other, keeping the ship of the universe, or your own little dinghy, properly trimmed. If that is true, and if we could somehow identify our entangled twins, we would automatically understand the quantum secrets of one by simply studying the actions of the other. And this leads us back to that seemingly ambiguous passage in the Bible. Will the unicorn be willing to serve thee, or abide by thy crib? What if that particular passage actually represented a sort of symbolic entangled pairing between the first part and the last part? Let's go down the rabbit hole a little while and see where it leads. In the first half of that passage, it speaks of a mythical beast that, in other passages of the Bible, possesses a horn. For some strange reason, instead of choosing the easier to accept translation of Ra'em as ox, the King James Version deliberately uses unicorn instead. It deliberately trades believability for fantasy. But why? Could it be that the words willing to serve fit the traditional operational directive of the unicorn as only being willing to serve a virgin? Could it also be that the unicorn was seen as a symbolic representation of Christ, with the virgin being the Virgin Mary? That leaves the second part. As I revealed earlier, the Hebrew word translated as crib also means feeding trough. If this second part truly refers to an unknown entangled pair, what sort of non-mythical creature possesses similar traits as the unicorn, and yet would be known by an insatiable need to feed? What about that metaphor I used earlier, the one with the mosquito? Both the mosquito and the unicorn are adorned with a phallic protuberance on their head. In the former, it is part of the mouth. In the latter, as would be expected in a mirror echo, it is located in the forehead. One is pointed up, while the other is pointed down. One is linked to ethereal thoughts via the mind, while the other is linked to the physical needs of the body. Both the mosquito and the unicorn are associated with the feminine, but their love is gender neutral. With the former, only the females are the bloodsuckers, with the blood serving to nourish their reproductive process. They are drawn or enchanted by the blood of their victims. With the latter, however, the unicorn itself is the enchantress and draws on the imagination of those it can woo, thereby siphoning their affection. Only a female virgin can quell their energy. The former represents the tangible, while the latter represents the ethereal. One is hated, while the other is loved. Mirror opposites. Both mosquitoes and unicorns are exceedingly old, with the former being possibly hundreds of millions of years old, while the latter allegedly lives thousands of years and dates to the beginning of the recorded word. Both mosquitoes and unicorns are associated with flight. The former spends its formative life cycle in the water and later takes to the air, while similarly some versions of the latter have a Pegasus-like vibe, with the unicorn sprouting wings. Does it too originate from the sea, or, in a mirror application, is it destined to return to the sea? Both mosquitoes and unicorns apparently seem to arrive in swarms. In the case of the former, amazingly, the state of Alaska, with its own horn-like appendage, probably endures some of the worst mosquito swarms. In the case of the latter, just do some quick internet searches to see how prevalent unicorns are in stores right now. Wouldn't that constitute a swarm? Like the ubiquitous mosquito, unicorns are everywhere. And finally, unicorns likely enchant more people than any other creature, while mosquitoes kill more people per year than any other animal, over an estimated 700,000. The former is a true friend, while the latter is a terrifying enemy. Just imagine if 700,000 people were killed in a war every year. In any event, this is yet another form of mirror opposite, another example of entanglement. So how does any of this reveal what a unicorn actually represents? Quite simply, if mosquitoes love blood and use it in order to perpetuate the species, in some cases killing in order to survive, then that aspect would symbolically represent the defining element of our physical world, the uncontrollable need to dominate and become manifest. They represent our physical form, our physical bodies. However, since unicorns don't physically exist in our world, would not the unicorn best represent the unseen spiritual realm and thus symbolize our very souls, or more specifically, the long-forgotten primordial region from whence we came? Think about it. As I stated before, the horn of the mosquito is part of its mouth, thus being representative of the physical realm by ingesting sustenance. The horn of the unicorn is in the head, and thus is representative of the spiritual or divine realm. These are mirror opposites. Likewise, souls are neither male nor female, as far as we know, so it is only appropriate that they would be represented by a creature that is both masculine and feminine, hence the unicorn. Hauntingly, if the short-lived mosquito sucks blood to procreate, would not the return of the unicorn have a similar role? Given the operation of the mirror, does the latter's overwhelming appearance herald a time in the not-so-distant future when the spilling of blood will bring about a massive soul harvest and the periodic rebirth or resurrection of mankind? Why, that almost makes the unicorn Christ-like, doesn't it? Intriguingly, there's much more to the symbolism that we need to uncover. You see, there are other associated elements present that seek to reinforce my supposition. It's time to go a little deeper down that rabbit hole. We find that the meaning of the word unicorn can be traced to the Latin unicornus, which signifies single horn. This has the very same Latin root, cornu, as the unsightly thickening of the skin known as a corn. Unicorn, therefore, is both a horn and a corn. This brings us to yet another intriguing word in the English language, acorn, a word with likely a Germanic origin. An acorn, of course, refers to the fruit of oak trees. Fruit, seed, the presence of offspring. This is somewhat similar to the mosquito drinking blood from its horn in order to bring about the creation of offspring. One is before, while the other is after, more mirror opposites. Could it be possible, then, that acorn might actually be linked to unicorn as well? Such a query might sound ludicrous on the surface, but there are actually several intriguing similarities. First, let's look at the etymology of acorn. Ostensibly, it is linked to acre and refers to the fruit of the open or unenclosed land. This seems to reference wide open spaces, and by extension, freedom. Given that its parent oak tree is tall and strong, both it and, by extension, the acorn, have several attributes in common with the unicorn: strength and freedom. Of course, the most obvious common element between unicorn and acorn is corn. In the former, it represents a horn, and in the latter, the offspring of trees. But could there be yet another object that would seek to bring both together? Long ago, the word corn, in addition to referencing a horn, also referred to grain, any grain. Eventually, however, only a specific type of crop, known as maize, gradually came to be known as corn. Maize, however, is steeped in occult symbolism. It is supposedly a domesticated crop created by human hands via the hybridization of grasses over 9,000 years ago. As a monoecious plant, it contains both male and female attributes. In a field of corn, we find the masculine aspects, the tassel, are on top in the shape of a tree, while the feminine aspects are below. This mimics the male spiritual world above and the feminine physical world below. Interestingly, the phallic or horn-shaped ear with milk-filled kernels is the feminine inflorescence and is covered with a veil of green leaves and silky strands of long hair that gradually turns red as it matures. These attributes symbolize a unity of gender, just like the unicorn. But more than that, they deliberately reference the gender of humanity. This is, in essence, a reversal of the events in Eden, when the female was taken out of the male and became divided. Here, in the guise of corn, that divided pair now becomes one. But more than that, however, corn represents perfection. The individual parts of male and female have become golden, a color located on the crossing of the third part, between the complementary opposites of the masculine red, one of the meanings of Adam, and the feminine green. It is a location defined by the golden ratio. This makes corn even more sacred and significant. According to the Bible, the gods, both male and female, if you properly understand the symbolism of the plurality presented, created mankind, both male and female, in their own image. Here we see a mirror echo of that mythical primordial act being relived. Apparently, a very wise man, or woman, created corn in the image of the acorn and the unicorn. Like the pyramids, they created an object of symbolism that was meant to endure the ages. They created corn in the image of what they perceived was happening all around them. A gradual coming together over a single season measured in thousands of years, all in preparation for the periodic grand human harvest. It was called maize in deference to the hidden nature of what it actually represented, the maze in which we reside, and how we blindly stumble about on our journey, totally oblivious, until the end. The acorn's parent oak tree was considered sacred and linked to various gods of thunder from old mythology. For example, the following gods were all probably cognates referring to the same deity: the Celtic Tyrannus, the German Donar, the Roman Jupiter, the Greek Zeus, and the Norse Thor. All share many of the same symbols or traits, the primary being the oak and thunder. Oak would seem to represent strength in the physical world, while the unseen thunder seemed to reference the ethereal nature of the spiritual realm. In Norse mythology, Thor's oak was a tree sacred to the pagans of Germania. During their Christianization process, a saint named Boniface allegedly felled Thor's mighty oak tree and replaced it with an evergreen fir tree. Boniface claimed that the triangular shape of the fir better represented the Christian Trinity. Also, the fact that it was evergreen aptly symbolized the eternal life guaranteed by the felling of Christ. And let's not forget The fur was also more visually representative of the masculine tassel at the top of a stalk of corn. In any event, this incident was most likely the origin of the traditional Christmas tree. The symbolism behind felling an oak and replacing it with a fir would seem to bespeak some form of transformation process. From a purely religious standpoint, one tree was considered more desirable than the other, even though it would seem to be a form of pagan idolatry. Since we can't very well replace ourselves, we must therefore change or otherwise transform. You might easily reject this line of thought, but it should be remembered that the seed of oak trees, as we've already discussed, is the tiny acorn, while the seed of fir trees is the much larger pine cone. Given all the symbolism present in Christianity with respect to the pine cone, and in particular Catholicism, such as the penitential papal formale, the pine cone on the Pope's staff, and the larger statue of a pine cone at the Cortiglia della Pina in Vatican City, Rome, it is clear that the root goal of Christianity itself, or that which has been insidiously perverted and presented to us as Christianity, is to embrace a transformation process as symbolically represented by these two trees. We are meant to desire to be as the fir and not as the oak. We are meant to yearn for the fragility of the cone, but not the strength or royal crown of the acorn. Symbolically, this transformation process produces a mirror opposite. For example, the tiny acorn of the oak gives way to the larger cone of the fir, a cone which stands erect in a masculine manner, and which seeks to mimic the horn of a unicorn and an ear of maize. Likewise, the wood of the oak is strong, while the wood of the pine is weak. In addition, the leaves of many deciduous species of oak are marcescent, symbolically refusing to fall in the fall, with the leaves of certain oak species, like the pin oak, temporarily turning a brilliant red. This is respectively both similar and in opposition to the fir, which remains evergreen throughout the year. As stated earlier, both red and green are at opposite ends of the color wheel, while their ability to remain clothed throughout most of the year remains. Only for that short period in the spring is the oak temporarily naked, reminiscent of birth and the events in Eden. Of course, the root of this transformation symbolism is found in the acorn itself. You see, it contains large amounts of tannins, which are used in the tanning of skins to produce leather. That is their beneficial purpose. More directly, tannins are known for their ability to stain or otherwise to spoil. Esoterically, therefore, the acorn, and by extension the oak, represents something that stains the world. Since tannins are very bitter and astringent, we see a vital link to something else that is bitter: myrrh, a product that Christ, the alleged savior of this stained world, was given at both his birth and death. This recurring Christian aspect seems to connect all of the different elements because the gradual elimination or transformation of tannins over time plays an important role in determining the time of the harvest, and thus leads to the ripening of fruit and the aging of wine. This is a critical part of the message we are meant to understand. You see, since myrrh was present at the death of Christ, it meant that the time of the harvest was still a ways off. The transformation process found in the symbolism of changing from an oak to a fir would seem to reflect the pacification of a strong enemy, making it easier to defeat. After all, it is the very presence of tannins in oak that forms a defensive barrier and makes the wood very resistant to insect and fungal attack, while the fir tree has been neutered and possesses no such defensive protection. It is this element of pacification that is found in both the narratives of Christ, with his effeminate portrayal in art, and the equally effeminate mythology of the unicorn. Contrary to what we have been taught, this would seem to reflect not a saving, but an unalterable conquering of our souls by an unknown enemy. Ironically, while the pine cone seems to represent our defeat, it is the pineal gland that serves as our link to the spiritual realm and home. That tiny pine-cone-shaped endocrine gland is located near the center of the brain between the two hemispheres, symbolically hidden in an area that would mimic the location of the unicorn's horn, but on the inside. Officially, it is responsible for our sleep cycles. Symbolically, it would seem, the pineal gland keeps us asleep and apart from the truth until it is too late. And finally, all of my videos to date have, in some way, referenced the Freemasons and their sacred hidden cache of ancient knowledge. This video will be no different. You see, corn leads us to corner, the final stop on this magical mystical merry-go-round. What is a corner? Quite simply, it is a place where two lines or edges meet to form an angle. If those lines were to continue onward, it would represent the point of a crossing. Symbolically, this represents the location of an accident, a great battle, a violent clash, a crucifixion. Every intersection or crossing contains four corners, just as a simple traditional house has four corners. Pay attention, boys and girls, because those four outward corners of a room or a house in the physical world are mirrored inwardly and form a single point, a singularity, if you will, the point of a crossing, our crossing. It is the location of our entry into the physical world. At the site of that momentous meeting, there is a single symbolic monument placed to honor that grand crossing, and it is known as a cornerstone. The symbolism is such that the cornerstone seeks to unite the walls, or the opposing points of view that became divided upon entry into this world. It marks the solidification, in physical form, of the spiritual element that crossed over during our birth. That which is formed is created in the image of itself. That is why the cornerstone is the enigmatic starting point for every official or governmental edifice. It marks the image of its parent. It is the base upon which the rest of the structure depends, the one element that provides unity. It is of such critical importance because the cornerstone represents the soul. As such, the Freemasons honor its placement by performing an elaborate ceremony using oil, wine, and corn. Wine, of course, represents those bitter tannins that stain, and the blood of the time of the harvest. It represents the original form of our souls, which somebody believes is evil or stained. This hypothetical harvest is honored once a month or once a cycle in women when the body and blood flows, and it was represented in the story of Christ with the bread and wine ritual of the Eucharist. Corn, on the other hand, represents a time when women become like men and men like women. That grand mirrored role reversal, or joining, which is also linked to the harvest. It represents what we will become, the completion of the sacred transformation process, the conquering of our souls. But what does oil mean? The anointing of oil is a form of consecration. However, it's a little more complicated than that, and the true symbolic meaning has become deliberately confused and corrupted over time. Haven't you ever wondered about the two forms of anointing being performed in the Bible? There's the more traditional version that uses fats or oils, and then there's the Messianic movement's version called baptism that uses water. Intriguingly, these two elements are mirror opposites, both in form and function. After all, oil and water don't mix. Water is used to cleanse and wash away, while oil is used to seal, mask, and lock away. The former is a form of uncovering truth, while the latter represents the depths of deception. At its most basic, oil represents the physical world, while water would best betray the spiritual realm. The spiritual is sealed or locked away by the oil in the cornerstone laying ceremony, just like our souls are locked behind a rib cage, imprisoned within our bodies. This supposition would tend to be confirmed by the fact that oil floats on the surface of water, symbolically attempting to mask it. Oil is also a nonpolar molecule, which means there is no difference in electronegativity, thus making it in balance and obeying the immutable justice of the physical world, where every action is offset by an equal and opposite reaction. Water, on the other hand, is a polar molecule, making it inherently out of balance and the perfect representative of the hidden divine realm that lies at the heart of everything, the image from which everything is based. This image produces a one-third, two-thirds split, which also necessarily defines the separation of the physical and spiritual realms respectively, just as water itself is defined by a one-third, two-thirds split, 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen. For more information on this latter aspect, you will need to see my other videos or read my books. In the end, we find that water and oil are akin to the concepts of good and evil, respectively, two mutually exclusive philosophies that can never mix, and as such, help carry us back to the events in Eden, back to the point of when the waters were divided by the symbolic oil of heaven. Naturally, what I just said sounds incredible. However, the Freemasonic NASA is quite adept at relaying the truth while hiding it as metaphor or parable. Interestingly, as I was at this very point in creating this video, and it takes me months to create these videos, an event occurred to confirm the seemingly insane claims of my previous paragraph. Just a scant 33 minutes into the new year, 2019, from an Eastern Standard Time perspective that is, the New Horizons space probe allegedly flew past an object in space unofficially known as Ultima Thule. It is an object that represents the most sacred symbol at the very heart of all existence, one that obeys the one-third, two-thirds dictum as revealed in my other videos and books. It is a symbol replicated in the sky above our head, the solar analemma, the land beneath our feet, as we will see in a moment, the wondrous shape of the feminine form, the simplistic hourglass. It's even displayed in the streets of Washington, D.C., thanks to Freemasonic foreknowledge. Ultima Thule loosely translates to a place located beyond the borders of the known world. As such, it symbolically represents that hidden spiritual realm, our bygone home. It is itself a cornerstone, marking the location of a sacred crossing. Lest we forget, the number 33 was associated with the age of Christ at his death on the cross. It would only be logical that a symbol marking the crossing between the male spiritual realm above and the feminine physical world below would be found at 33 minutes past the hour. The flyby of Ultima Thule was made precisely 18 days, 13 hours, and 27 minutes prior to the 13th anniversary of the launch of New Horizons. Hauntingly, a mirrored application of the primary temporal elements of this time period, 18 and 13, tends to reference Revelation 13:18, which states, "Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Why would I dare link that time period with Revelation 13, verse 18? Quite simply, because of that final number, 27. You see, the 27th word of the King James translation is 6, the first of that triplicity of sixes. The number 13, of course, is the 6th prime. What does this mean? Occurring as it does 33 minutes into the first day of 2019 would tend to imply that something ominous will occur later this year with respect to the coming crossing, and linked to both the visual representation and occult symbolism of Ultima Thule. You see, Christ died at 33 while crossing into the third part of this nearly 5,800-year cell of time, from Eden until now. We will soon be crossing back over into that dreaded 666 region, our original home, the Sea of Souls. Naturally, this is not something we can do while shackled to our physical bodies. This might sound like simple fear-mongering. However, there is historical precedent. You see, back on January the 1st, 2001, a similar event occurred. On what would arguably be seen as the first day of the 21st century, a large, 9-foot-tall black monolith, just like the one in the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, mysteriously appeared in Seattle's Magnuson Park. It was there for 3 days, until vanishing as ethereally as it had appeared. 8 months and 8 days later, the events of 9/11 took place at a mirror part of the country. The movie 2001: A Space Odyssey was a story of rebirth for mankind, as told in a microcosm. Oh, and its creator, Stanley Kubrick? Well, he died precisely 666 days prior to the appearance of that dark monolith in Seattle on New Year's Day 2001. Yes, there's that pesky number again, 666. The symbolism exists all around us to lend credence to my words, if only we could just learn to see it. For example, in Germany between the world wars of the last century, radical occultists believed that Thule, that mythical land to the farthest north, was the primordial origin of the white Aryan race. The Thule Society was associated with the misguided beliefs of the Nazis, and may have been the source of their obsession with white supremacy. However, what if the mythical Ultima Thule they sought wasn't a place on Earth, but instead was located in the sky? If that is true, the symbolism of the stellar Ultima Thule is such that it marks the boundary between the mirrored spiritual and physical realms. As such, it would indeed represent a spiritual region of white, undivided light. Ironically, if only the Nazis could have deduced how the mirror worked, they would have been able to see that the perpetually elusive perfection they sought was not of the physical world, but of the spiritual. That which they hoped to purify in others was something that everyone already possessed, the white unity of the soul. Imagine how differently history might have played if they could have beheld for one brief moment the bigger picture. Please understand, I am not advocating for white racial supremacy, or anything in the physical world for that matter. I am simply trying to explain the meaning of the symbolism taking place all around us. The dividing of white light into the rainbow spectrum is yet another clue to the true meaning of the unicorn. All around us, the demonization of the white race, and white males in particular, is at a fever pitch. Have you ever asked why? Because it refers to the original home of our souls, the united state of light. Those who control our destiny are doing everything in their power in a last-ditch effort to get you to hate what you truly are, to sully your very own soul. Inside, we are all white, and from a purely scientific perspective, white can be the only unifying element of the divided spectrum of the rainbow. It's time we remember and embrace that fact. Of course, this wasn't the only space-related event in recent memory to draw attention to that sacred symbol and be linked to Christ. You see, on 1 April 2018, Easter Sunday, a Chinese space station named Heavenly Palace made a fiery fall to Earth in a manner that mimicked the fall of Adam and the birth of Christ. And it would fall in a location near an island that visually mimicked Ultima Thule, just 482 miles south-southwest of Tahiti, an island in the form of the Analemma. Naturally, Good Friday in 2018, referencing the day that Christ died, was 0330, March the 30th, or 3333. Symbolism, boys and girls. The Freemasons are masters at revealing truth through events. After all, anything symbolic is guaranteed to provide plausible deniability because you simply tell the gullible herd that it really means something else. In this case, the Freemasonic cornerstone laying ceremony that includes the corn, wine, and oil is meant to honor that aboriginal crossing of the spiritual to the physical, the masking of the soul, and the deceptive and destructive transformation that occurs to us once we are here. It's meant to laud the conquering of our very souls. The movie 2001: A Space Odyssey was an effort by those in the know to explain to you what is coming. It is also meant to reveal that the fate in question is being carefully guided by creatures from beyond the wall or veil, as represented by the monolith. Since it also coincidentally mimics the dimensions of a movie screen, we could even reach the logical conclusion that we, in fact, function merely as entertainment for whoever is pulling the proverbial strings. You must understand, Stanley Kubrick was a master at the art of multi-layered symbolism in his movies, and he was apparently privy to the great cache of enigmatic esoterica held by the secret societies, such as Freemasonry. As a result, in his movies, he essentially told a story within a story to correctly reflect our own existence that itself consists of a story playing above and a story playing below. In the case of 2001: A Space Odyssey, the discovery of the monolith on the moon is mirrored in the real-life discovery of a monolith in Seattle on January the 1st, 2001. Was this a case of uncanny prescience on the part of Kubrick, or was it merely the extreme act of as yet unknown fans that simply wished to pay homage to his film? Could both have been a deliberate Freemasonic message that the great Odyssey was about to begin? Whatever the answer, in 2001, we were all about to make a big right turn in time and cross back over our original course nearly 2 decades later, just like the loop Flight 77 made before allegedly crashing into the Pentagon on 9/11. Naturally, the symbolism of that act was to reflect making a crossing through a tunnel or conduit, as the 5-ringed Pentagon represented. We must remember that Seattle is the city with the iconic and apropos Space Needle, which, like Ultima Thule, is in the sacred form of the solar analemma. It was only logical that the appearance of the monolith in Seattle would herald death on 9/11, just as it heralded death at the beginning of the movie when it taught the apes to kill. Both the appearance of the monolith in the primate past and its rediscovery on the moon forms the basis for a similar epoch, the beginning of the beginning and the beginning of the end. In real life, the year 2001 would again serve as both the start of an epoch and the end of the Christian Gregorian era of time, since the destruction of the Twin Towers at Ground Zero mirrored the birth of Christ at Year Zero between the twin ones of 1 BC and 1 AD, passing into and out of the third part of this cell of time, like passing through the Pillars of Hercules. If my analysis is correct, then, with but a simple modification of temporal length from months to years, that would mean that the culminating event would take place not 18 months in the future, but 18 years. 18 years downstream from 2001 is 2019, the very same year as the flyby of Ultima Thule that took place just 18 days prior to the 13th anniversary of New Horizons' launch. Are you beginning to see the reasoning behind my linking to Revelation 13:18? Yes, I am offering the seemingly incredible possibility that a similar sequence of events is taking place between the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey and real life. Instead of a ship called Discovery flying to Jupiter, we have a ship called New Horizons flying to Pluto. In the movie, another monolith was discovered near Jupiter, a monolith that, as we learned at the beginning of the movie, had been with mankind since the very beginning, leading and misleading the herd. In real life, the modern monolith, discovered in perfect mirror fashion after reaching Pluto, is now known as Ultima Thule. Like the monolith in the movie, the sacred symbol it betrays has been with mankind since the beginning, as it lay at the very root of all existence. Hauntingly, given what I've already shown you, that would mean that an event will occur in 2019 that will both mimic 9/11 in scope and the microcosmic ending of 2001: A Space Odyssey. The final destruction of mankind will begin. In the movie, With the exception of the character of Bowman, everyone was killed, and he would go on to endure rapid aging and then a rebirth. Logically, we can expect a similar fate. Rapid aging would represent the exhaustion of time within our temporal cell. Sound crazy? Consider that the events of 9/11 took place precisely 33 years, 5 months, and 9 days after the April 2nd, 1968 release of 2001: A Space Odyssey. There's that number 33 again. Intriguingly, 2019 marks the 51st anniversary of the release of that film. The number 51 was highly prominent in the events of 9/11/2001, in that when you divide the morning's events into two distinct acts that are split by action type, those being strike and fall, we find that from the strike on the North Tower to the strike on the Pentagon constitutes 51 minutes, while from that point to the fall of the North Tower, which included the fall of Flight 93 and the fall of both towers, constitutes another 51 minutes. All of these elements are linked. And finally, it should be remembered that Seattle's official nickname is the Emerald City. This harkens back to yet another esoteric masterpiece involving a person making a crossing to another realm, from monochromatic to color. In The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy had to journey to the Emerald City in the hopes of finding her way home. It is my belief that very soon we are all about to find our own way home. We will go from this divided land of color to one of white. Or will we? You see, black is either the absence or the complete absorption of all visible colors. As such, could that be our entropic destination? It would tend to explain, from a symbolic standpoint, the overt application and elevation of black in racial terms, while being white is hated. Absorption of all colors would also be reflected in the open borders illegal immigration efforts taking place globally. As with the presence of the unicorn, our stage is busy softly speaking to us all the time. Don't you think it's time we pause to listen? We have all been asleep. We have all been collectively hitting the snooze button and blithely ignoring what is really happening all around us. Now, we find ourselves like frogs in a pot of water that has slowly and methodically been increasing in temperature and is now starting to boil. We started this video daring to ponder the enigma of the unicorn, and our detailed analysis has carefully and methodically led us here. To be honest, this is a destination that I did not expect. But such has been the case throughout my journey of discovery. It would be intriguing to view the massive influx of unicorns as if they are vultures, ambulance-chasing lawyers, tow truck drivers, or even the Grim Reaper. They are patiently waiting for the vast array of souls to ferry home, following the final act of a perverted fertility ritual that has been repeated over and over for millions of years. For better or worse, the universe is busy screaming at us all the time regarding what is about to happen. Unfortunately, we have been insidiously programmed to ignore what we cannot see. Nevertheless, the evidence is clear. Our cell of time has exhausted the fuel it needs to continue. The final stage of that transformation process I mentioned earlier, that is leading to the corruption of our souls, is nearly complete. And the unicorn? It is silently waiting and stubbornly pointing the way.